some of you might know that we anonymize and aggregate the usage of our platform, and we call it Nudgeonomics. What I thought would be interesting is to take you through usage of Nudge in a year of COVID. So as a first slide, what you can see here is before really the pandemic struck Europe, 24th of Feb, 2nd of March, 9th of March. We'd obviously seen what was going on in the news in China, and there was starting to be some rumblings, is something happening in Italy? But what we're seeing as far as financial well-being concerns are there is that people are still very much looking at forward-looking items. So things like savings, things like investing, things like mortgages and so forth. But then something really interesting happens in the 16th of March as people became really aware that actually this pandemic was reaching into Western Europe. And what happened was that people pivoted their usage of Nudge almost entirely into very defensive areas of budgeting and in the home, which is basically, right, how do I protect my earnings and how do I make them work harder for me? Then as we moved into April, governments all over the world started throwing huge amounts of money at the problem. And you can see there that people became aware that actually there was a lot of government support available to them. One of the things that we ask you to consider with your financial wellbeing strategy is that maybe your people are okay, but maybe their partner had been put on furlough or lost their job, or maybe their mother, brother, sister, father. And so people were looking at the platform to see what government support was available, maybe for them, but also their wider family and friends group. Then when we move forward to the 20th of April, you can see avoiding scams became a key area. Now, one of the sad facts of the pandemic and the fact that we've all been working from home more has been the exponential increase in online scams. And so people were becoming very concerned about how do they create a defensibility against that. Then as we move into the 11th of May and people were dealing with homeschooling, you can see that people started looking at areas around the children and the family. And sadly, there was also a 500% increase in people looking at areas around divorce and separation. And then as we get to the end of May, debt starts rearing its ugly head as maybe people had started eating into their dwindling savings. So what we're going to do now is fast forward, and what this graph is showing you is the difference between usage on Nudge between Q4 2020 and Q1 2021. And you can see here the biggest increase in interest is around investing. Now, if we're honest, this has actually taken us by surprise here at Nudge as well, that it's almost come from nowhere, and we've actually termed it investor mania. But when you actually dig deeper into that increase in interest in investing, what's incredibly fascinating is how aligned it is to age. And what we're seeing is a very, very clear line between how young you are and your interest in investing. So if you're in your 20s, you're incredibly interested in investing, and then dwindling, all the way down to when you're in your 60s, where there's almost no interest in investing whatsoever. Now, from a behavioral point of view, this is fascinating because we believe it's directly correlated to COVID, and the fact that older people have been more affected by the health crisis means that they've become much more risk averse over the last year, whereas younger people have felt emboldened. From another behavioral point of view, we also think that younger people maybe are rebelling because they can't take big risks in going out and partying all night and going on holiday, that they're actually turning to investing as a way of taking risk. But unfortunately, this is creating a number of problems. So if we look across the Atlantic to the US, their equivalent of group personal pension plans are group 401k plans. And what we're seeing is that people in the US are actually, younger people are investing their 401k plans directly into Bitcoin, for example, which is an incredibly risky and volatile asset class. And we're actually seeing evidence in Europe as well of young people putting their house deposits, for example, into Bitcoin, because they're seeing people who are hero to them, like Elon Musk, out there talking in the market about the fact that it could be a good thing.
Down, Ben. I
So,
like moments when you've
so
started.
what our view on this is that from a financial well-being point of view, that actually organizations have a fiduciary duty to the younger people who maybe haven't gone through a stock market crash before, of pointing out the risks and rewards, attitude to risk, and all those areas around investing that are so incredibly important to understand. So the next thing to talk about is women in the pandemic, and sadly on the financial side of the crisis and the social side of the crisis, women have taken the brunt of the hit here. So think back before the pandemic, we were talking about a gender pay gap. We were also talking about a gender pension gap. We were talking about a gender advice gap. There's now appeared a gender debt gap, where in early 2021, it's clear that women have taken the brunt of debt over the festive period. Now, going back onto that point I made about the gender pension gap as well, while something caught my eye last week, a report from Scottish Widows that actually showed that the women's pension savings have been more badly affected during the pandemic than males. And they gave the example of a male and a female in their 20s, where now a female is projected to have £100,000 less in their pension fund at retirement. So if you're an organisation who's interested in diversity and equality, this could be a key hook for you for your financial wellbeing program, of making sure that your women in your organisation are being catered for appropriately. And then the final insight I was going to make, again, a bit of a depressing one, is that unfortunately, as a consequence of COVID, the rich have got richer and the poor have got poorer. The key reason for that is that all of that money that governments have pumped into the system, what it's effectively done is inflated asset prices, which means that people who already had assets are better off, and those people who didn't have assets are materially not better off, and therefore have suffered. And you can see here in the usage of nudge how that plays out, with people earning over £60,000 interested in things like tax and investing, whereas those people earning under £60,000 interested, sadly, in areas around debt. So yeah, hopefully that's given you some food for thought about how the trends of financial well-being are dictated not only by our individual circumstances, like do we have children or a house or how much we earn, but also those macroeconomic things that affect us, like COVID, for example.